Hello, friends. I want to tell you about our new affiliate, Metagreens. Do you want to feel energized, focus, and support your brain health without having to take multiple vitamins and supplements? Metagreens is a clinically developed blend of natural super greens with a nitric oxide booster to help optimize your brain and body health as you age, all in one capsule. Nitric oxide is the miracle molecule that plays a vital role in regulating your immune system, nerve health, digestive system, and most importantly, your brain. Generally, people don't eat enough vegetable servings per day, causing low nutrient levels. And as we age, our nitric oxide levels decrease. With one daily dose of Metagreens, you'll get a nitric oxide boost, plus 35 nutrients filled with antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. Feel energized, be focused, and age wisely, all with Metagreens. Go to mymetagreens.com and use coupon code FKN10. You'll get 10% off your order. Get back to living your best life. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Pat O'Connell. First, a couple of announcements. A great way to help support Forbidden Knowledge News is with a Rokfin premium membership. With that, you get access to not only all our premium content, but all the premium content from every amazing creator on Rokfin. You can go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus or use the link right in the description. You can now get Forbidden Knowledge News live 5 days a week on Rokfin, Rumble, and our website. The website is forbiddenknowledge.news. That is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. We feature some incredible podcasts, and you can always get every new episode of Forbidden Knowledge News on Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Today I want to welcome Pat O'Connell. She is a communications consultant for high-tech corporations in fields as varied as nuclear power, aerospace, and antibody library solutions. She is also a researcher, novelist, and nonfiction author with eclectic interests from science and medicine to history and psychology, metaphysics, and the paranormal. Through it all, she remains an activist for truth and freedom. Pat, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you?
I'm excellent. Very busy, enjoying life, and I am super excited for this. Today we're going to discuss your book, Bleedthrough, a true story of aliens, demons, and pure evil in Texas. Now, this is amazing. This is a true story of Clay Wheeler, who witnessed an array of paranormal phenomena at Sparks County Airport, including UFOs, aliens, poltergeists, demonic possession, and even murder. And this is an incredible account that I'm so excited to get into. And there's a lot to talk about. But before we do that, this is your first time on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to write the book.
Well, I'm a professional communications consultant for high-tech industry. So I develop training and documentation and marketing and all kinds of things for, people like NASA and telecommunications companies. And I developed training for nuclear reactor operators and things like that. So that has been my life, simplifying complicated things. And so how I got into this was back in 2015 when my brother Jim contacted me. Now, Jim was an abductee. And I couldn't say that he wasn't. I love my brother, and I couldn't prove that he wasn't abducted or was. And so, I ran with it. And he was developing a reality TV show to address the experiences of those people who believe to have been abducted. He felt that their stories and their challenges hadn't been properly addressed in the media, and he wanted to give them some respect and credibility and say, whatever happened to you, it messed up your lives in most cases. Sometimes, in some cases, it was enriched their lives, but in a lot of cases, it was kind of traumatic for them. Even if it was a good experience, it was traumatic dealing with other people who didn't believe them or thought they were crazy or whatever. So he contacted me and said, I've got this case in Texas, and he was in Connecticut at the time. And he said, I can't possibly cover this story. It's so broad and there's so much going on, way more than abduction. In fact, abduction, Clay denied or didn't want to believe that he had been abducted. He had those kinds of experiences, but there were so many other experiences, UFO sightings and aliens in his apartment and crazy stuff like that. And so my brother said, knowing that I'm a writer, and he said, would you be interested in, first of all, talking to this guy and vetting him so that when my brother, who was in Connecticut, I'm here in Texas, so that when my brother came down, he'd know, is this guy for real? Is he a nutcase? That kind of thing. So I could vet him. And the other thing was, he thought maybe I could write a book or a series of books to cover the breadth of this crazy story, maybe a screenplay or whatever. And so I'm like, sure, I'm game. And then my brother, Jim, said, and this guy says that he has shot and killed and buried an alien. And I'm like, holy cow, I'm in, and my brain was racing. If this is true, this would change everything. This would be the biggest story in the history of humanity. So that's how I got started.
Right. Well, I think a great place to start with this would be to get a little bit of background on who Clay was and what he did.
Sure. Yeah. Clay had been, he was a pilot. He was a flight instructor. He was an aircraft repair technician, and he had a shop out here at this little middle of nowhere airport. And so he had a business repairing airplanes and teaching people how to fly. And he had been there for several years. And so maybe, I want to say he had been there for 13 years or something before anything started. And nothing had happened before that. And so, he was out there just doing his business, and it was real peaceful out there, and he had a crew that worked for him. Depending on how much business he had, the crew would, there would be more or less. And then, then everything changed all of a sudden in 2010.
Now, did his experiences start with witnessing craft?
The first thing that he encountered was he was living at the airport. He had built an apartment on his hangar. And late one night, some people came out to the airport, and he went out and talked to them. And it turns out that they came out there because they had seen strange lights in the sky in town. And so they drove out to the airport thinking they'd get a better view of whatever this was. And that commotion woke him up. And then he saw these lights in the sky doing what he knew as a professional pilot and a trainer and all that planes don't do that. Airships don't do that. Satellites don't do that. They were behaving in ways that he knew conventional craft didn't behave in. And that was really the start of his looking up at the skies and wondering what's going on, and actually challenging what he was seeing up there.
He actually saw craft that were almost low enough to perceivably touch. Is that right?
Yes, there was one craft that came in actually twice, and he said it was shaped like a hard shell eyeglass case, sort of oblong. And the first time it came down, he felt like it gave him this headache. It was like it came fairly low over him, not the case you're talking about where he could touch it, but it came over him, and there were witnesses to this. And he said that the thing came in after he had been playing laser tag with it. This was something that he liked to do. He started doing after that first incident, and he would go out at night and shine lasers, and he would see these lights that could have been planes. This was before you couldn't do that or you'd blind pilots. But he would shine lights at the lasers at these lights in the sky, and they would jump or they would move in ways that obviously a plane couldn't. So one night he was out doing this, and he was showing his friends, and this craft came in, and it was fairly low over the airport that they could see that it was this eyeglass shaped craft. And he just thought it was kind of cool. And the next thing he noticed was that he had this feeling like there was bucket of warm water being poured into his head and going all the way down his body. And after that happened, he had a monstrous headache. And so his team rushed him inside to get him away. And, he said that it was okay because he felt like they were trying to communicate with him. He said he imagined it was like what a computer feels like when it's downloading information. So, thinking in terms of what does a computer feel like, first of all, is strange and curious and interesting to me. And the fact that he thought they were trying to communicate with him, I thought was really cool. And of course, one of his friends said, no, I think they were trying to kill you. So that was the first case. And then later on, toward the end of his experiences, the 3 years of his experiences, and pretty much everything had gone downhill, and it was only him and one other employee out there. And then this same kind of craft, maybe the same one, maybe another one like it, came down and was hovering low enough near the hangar that he could reach out, and he touched the bottom of it. And I'm thinking, holy cow, what did it feel like? And he said it felt like wet leather. And he said it felt organic. He had this definite sense that it was organic, that it wasn't a machine. He expected it to be cold or hard like a machine, and it wasn't.
That is so interesting. Now, going back to how you first discovered Clay's story and first started speaking with him, I'm sure you did a great job vetting him and his story, but what was it about him that told you that he's not just crazy, he's not just having hallucinations or making up a story?
It's funny, Chris. I've thought about this a lot. And my husband and I went out to interview him the first time, and we spent the weekend out in the town nearby and went out to the airport. And when I first went out there, I thought, oh, good. He's telling me that he's got all this great evidence, this photographic evidence. And when I started, and I was excited about seeing all this. And then when I saw it, I was disappointed. There were, and I'm a skeptic. So you need to know that going into it. My brother was a believer. I'm a skeptic, but I'm the good kind, that I'm open. I'm Mulder from X-Files. I want to believe. So, I won't be, I'm not a pushover, but show me some decent evidence. Show me something convincing. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at his photos, and a lot of them were, it's a bug, or it was, he showed me photos of, or video actually, I think. No, it was photos of what some people call, and your listeners probably know what I'm talking about, they call rods or skyfish, where it looks like a snake with a whole bunch of wings flying through the air. And he said, it was coming from another dimension. And I said, well, this has actually been debunked. And I showed him the National Geographic or Discovery Channel video clips of it where they actually took video on a conventional camera and a high-speed camera with a timer in the middle. And you could see that in the conventional camera, it looked like a skyfish. It looked like the rod with the multiple wings. But on the high-speed camera, it was clearly a moth or some kind of winged bug just flying through. So, he was disappointed that I debunked that. And I explained to him, it's okay, because I believe after talking to him, and this goes back to your original question, after talking to him, I had the sense that he genuinely believed that he had these experiences. So I went in thinking I was going to have concrete evidence that I could show you, for example, and I could show your audiences, here's a picture or here's a video of it. And I ended up kind of throwing out all of that stuff and then listening to him and trusting my gut. So I think that he had some real experiences. It was the emotions. It was the way he would light up when he talked about these things. I don't think you can fake that if you're lying about it. If you're making it up, I don't think that would happen. So it really came down to my gut.
Was there any particular event or incident that he discussed with you that really pushed you over and caused you to have more belief in this?
Actually, it's the killing of the alien and burying it. And it wasn't so much, it was one of those things where throughout the whole time that the multiple times that I interviewed him, he would kind of weasel out of telling me the details of that story. So in one way you could think, oh, well, he's lying about it. He doesn't, he hasn't made up a well-rounded story about that. And so I kept pushing. Each time I interviewed him, I'd push and I'd push. And he'd say, well, he'd give me a little bit and then he'd say, well, I'll write that down for you. Or I wrote it down in a journal and it's in the shipping container with all my stuff after I moved out of the airport. I've got all my equipment and I think this journal's in there somewhere. And I wrote it down and I'll find it and send it to you. So every time I would get so far, he would go off and he would try to avoid talking about it. And so the last time I interviewed him, I pushed him because I wanted to know. This was the most important part of his story in many ways. And I wanted to know, why wouldn't he talk about it? And finally, in this last interview, I said, what is it? Why won't you tell me about this?
Now, Pat, I'm going to stop you right here because I want you to put a pin in this. I want to come back to this. I would like for the audience to understand how his actual contact with these beings started.
Sure.
And then we'll build to that.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you have to know how he got there.
Right. Hello, friends. Chris Matthew with Forbidden Knowledge News here. I have an important announcement. Forbidden Knowledge News needs your help. We hope to soon have the means to travel to New Mexico and Utah to start production of Season 2 of the Forbidden documentary series. We are changing the format of the series. Instead of 3 30-minute episodes per season, each season will be a full-length 90-minute film. I'm in the process of finishing up Season 1 and combining all episodes into a full-length film. It should be done by early October. Unfortunately, we have had some equipment breakdowns recently, and we need donations so that we can update our equipment and continue producing incredible content for you all. We are completely self-funded. No big-name mattress or boner pill sponsorships here to help us out, so we could use your help. We need new laptop, mixer, and microphone. If you would like to help with the donation, please use the link right in the description. There is a PayPal link. Also, you can go to supportfkn.com. Other ways you can help. You can purchase the limited edition version of episode 1 from our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, or there is also a direct link in the description that you can click to get that episode. You can also get a Rokfin premium membership. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus. Thank you all for the amazing support and love you've shown over the years, and continue to help us make the next few years even more incredible.
So the first instance where he saw, well, it probably wasn't the first one, but it was the first close encounter, was he was in his apartment that's attached to his hangar. It's at the end of his hangar, and in the middle is his office. So he couldn't sleep. It's the middle of the night. He's been seeing things. He's been seeing these ships on the runway. He's been seeing saucer types. He saw a big, what was like I called it a soap bubble. The way he described it was sort of iridescent. It was just round. It was an orb. It didn't look like anything other than a big bubble. But he had seen other ships. And so one night he can't sleep. It's 3:00 in the morning. And he thinks, well, I'll just call my sister. She's working in China. She was on contract in China. And it's 3:00 during the day for her. I'll just call her. And so he was calling her. He talked to her and he said, sis, I've got all this crazy stuff happening that you wouldn't believe. And she said, try me. And so he was telling her about the ships that he was seeing. And she was saying, let's talk about this on a different line. So I think she was on her business line, and she, for whatever reason, didn't want that conveyed there. And so as he's talking to her about, kind of vaguely about these experiences, he was a kind of an antsy, kind of restless guy. And so while he's talking on the phone, he walks over to the door that leads from his apartment into the office, and he just absently opens the door. And as the door opens, he looks to his left and he sees 2 little gray aliens about 4 feet tall. And he said the weird thing about them was that they moved away from the door like a gate, like they were joined together, and they moved away like a gate. Now, I've never heard that described before.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And he said they were in silverish, grayish silver outfits. And he said they're, and this is a Texan thing, but he said it looked like they were wearing boots that just looked like plain old ropers, spray painted silver. So, if you know what those are, they're not cowboy boots. They don't have pointy toes. They don't have carving on them. They're just plain old work boots. And then he said he looked here, and then he looked over to his right, and he saw this tall alien. And he said it was naked, kind of like a Ken doll. So there's no features on the body, but it seemed to be naked. And this one was not silver or gray or anything like that. He said it was tan, brownish. And he said the head was big and the eyeballs were protruding from the sockets. It was like they were too big for the sockets, and the lids closed top and bottom. And he said in the back, there were these protrusions in the back of the head. And so he said, I knew right away this was their bodyguard. This was the bodyguard for the 2 little guys. And he said, then that guy took 1 step forward. He says it lunged toward him. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but it took a step forward. And he said, I backed out of there, closed the door, dropped the phone, and didn't go back. Didn't open the door again for I don't know how long. He didn't really tell me when he next opened the door. But he dropped the phone, and his sister told me that he said, gotta go. That was it. So that was the first close encounter with some aliens. And then to your question, how he led up to the point where he would have shot an alien.
How did everything progress?
Yeah, so it worked its way up. So this is the first time, you've got these 3 aliens and they're in your house, basically. Everything was locked up. So you're thinking, how did they get in? Clearly, my security here does nothing. So if they want to get in, they can get in. So that's the first thing that set him on edge, and it would set anybody on edge if creatures or people are getting into your house and you're locked up and it's still locked up. And so as time passed, he's seeing more things, and then crazier other things happened. There were, as in the title, there was instances of people's personalities would change, almost like demonic possession and things like that. So all this weird stuff is happening. And
now, maybe you could give us one little example of how that would happen to people and what he experienced.
Sure. Well, the first example was a poltergeist kind of thing, and it was a simple one, and that wasn't scary. So then I'll tell you about his wife. The first one was he lost his keys, and he only kept them in 2 different places, and he couldn't find them in either place. And he looked and looked, and he asked his wife, have you seen them? No. Did you look in one of these 2 places? Yes. And so he couldn't figure out where they would have gone. It was after hours. The crew was gone. And he went out to the shipping container that he stored things in. They weren't there. He looked everywhere. So he was about to give up. And then he hears the heat kick on in the ceiling of the hangar. And he hears this little rattling noise. Well, his keychain had, they had these red tags that said remove before flight, that when they repaired a part on the airplane, they put this tag on it that said, don't fly the plane until you remove this tag, remove before flight. So yeah, it was this big, long red tag. So he hears the heat kick on, he looks up, and here's this red tag way up 30 feet high in the ceiling of the hangar. And that's where his keys were. So that's one weird thing. But then there was a whole sequence of things with his wife, and his crew had personality changes. It seemed like they went dark when they clocked in, and they would be angry or combative or whatever. But his wife was the one that was mostly affected by these personality changes. And the first instance, I believe, was when they were having a fight at a restaurant. They go out they had both their cars, and she was going to go to work, and they were fighting at the car, and she slams his hand in her truck, in the truck door, and drags him like 1.5 miles beside the car, beside the truck. And then she finally opened the door, and he went skidding, and then he blacked out. So he didn't know what happened, but he ended up with multiple broken ribs. He had, I believe, 3 limbs that were broken. So I think it was 2 arms and 1 leg that were broken. And
they didn't have a history of domestic violence or anything like that?
No, she was like sweet and prim and proper at the beginning of all of this. And so she started to slowly turn dark. And then another instance was when she woke up one morning and she looked like she was 8 months pregnant and was really angry and just hostile. And he caught her eating hamburger meat out of the fridge that was for dinner that night. No. And when he tried to say, that you got something wrong with you, I've got to take you to the hospital, she's got this big swelling in her belly that looks like she's pregnant, and she wasn't the day before. And she wouldn't let him take her to the hospital, and she runs off. And when she came back, that was gone.
That's crazy.
So all of this weird stuff is happening. And so, as you can imagine, as time goes on, you're thinking you're losing your mind, but it's happening to other people, and other people are seeing what's going on. And his health started to deteriorate throughout this process too. Well, the first time, he got dragged by his wife, and he ended up with all these broken bones, is in the hospital. He's on pain meds and who knows what else, antibiotics or whatever. Yeah. So throughout the course of this 3-year period, his health he's hit by one thing and another. And for whatever reason, all of these things started happening health-wise. So imagine all of this piling on you. And then now we come back to the aliens and how that progressed to a shooting.
Yeah.
So he's in the shop one night, and I'm not sure which story was which, because he explained that by the time we interviewed him in 2015, that he said, I've been on a lot of drugs because of all these illnesses and injuries and things that had happened. So he couldn't trust his memory. He said that his memory had started to get Swiss cheese by the time we met him. So this one night, he's at the shop. He may or may not have had his secretary there wrapping some things up. But there was one of those little gray aliens in the shop. But he said that, and by this point, he's carrying guns with him. He's got a gun at his workbench. He's loaded for bear. He doesn't know what's happening, but he just knows that these creatures can invade his life, and he doesn't know whether they have good or bad intentions. And so he's armed. He doesn't know what they're going to do. So this small alien is in the shop, and he's got the gun, and he's ready to shoot this thing. And the alien he said it was like a breastplate that had what I could only describe as a laser or energy weapon that came out of this breastplate. And it was like a blue beam about 4 inches in diameter. And it just shot through the hangar. It cut through everything in its path, cut a hole in the outside of the hangar, which is corrugated steel. And then the thing was gone. And so that was kind of that's it. I know that they're out to kill me, or they can kill me if they want to. So now this is at the point where he's terrified. His reflexes are just on edge all the time. So now
you said it shot out the side of the hangar. Was there evidence of this? Was anyone able to verify the damage?
Well, I don't know. He said he repaired it, and okay. My impression was that he had replaced a whole sheet of this corrugated steel to repair the damage. Now, I don't know if he repaired it on the inside, and I've not been inside the hangar because he had sold it and it belonged to somebody else. So I don't know if there would be evidence on the inside of the hangar of that. Right. Okay. Yeah, that would be something that I definitely would want to see.
Definitely. So how did we get to the shooting?
So time passed, and there were actually 2 shootings. There were 2 more alien encounters in the shop or in the office in that area. So the next one was, he was working, and there were a couple of crew members with him, and an alien came in, and he just reflexively shot it. And the thing fell on the hangar floor, and he said it started to bleed out. And he said he had the sense that the vapors, that was like outgassing, that the vapors were toxic. And so he and his 2 crew members left the hangar. And they said that when they came back, they waited a while. And when they came back, the thing was gone. But there were
other witnesses to this as well?
Supposedly. Now, I haven't been able to track them down yet. So we're working on, my team is working on that now, trying to track down these people, the witnesses. Yes. The only witnesses that I've spoken to the only witness really was his mom to some of this. And so when they came back to the hangar, he said that the alien was gone. And he's thinking, he was kind of glad that it was gone. He's imagining that the alien paramedics came and got him and resuscitated him, and everything was okay. He didn't want to hurt anybody. So this was part of the story. He had mixed feelings about this because he so wanted to know what they know. He wanted to communicate with them, but he was terrified. So there's those 2 dynamics going on at the same time. So they came back, and the alien was gone. He said he called it a helmet, but he said it wasn't like a NASA helmet or a motorcycle helmet. It was more like a skull cap thing, and it was left there. And so, and he also said that the concrete was etched where it had looked like it had started to bleed out when they were still there. So, and when we were out there, he was saying, gosh, I wish we could get in so I could show you where that thing bled out or started to bleed, and it etched the concrete or etched tile. And so we weren't able to see that. So that was the second one. Now, the third time it happened, he was there by himself. And he said it was just a case of he was working, his nerves were on ragged edge, and he hears movement in the hangar of the workshop. And he just comes around, he sees this creature, and he shoots it and he kills it. Because he knows that it potentially has the power to shoot this beam through him, which would kill him. And so he just reflexively shot it. And he said, and it fell over and it for sure died. And he now has this alien body on his hand.
All right. Yeah. So what does he proceed to do with this?
Yeah. And that's more craziness. So in retrospect, telling us the story years later, he's saying, if you had told me that I shot an alien and I had the body on my hangar floor and didn't go to the news media, call Oprah, call CNN, put it in the back of my truck and say, alien.
Take pictures, take videos.
Right. He said, I would have said, you're out of your mind. That would never happen. This is the greatest news ever. I'm going to share it with the world. But he said he had these odd feelings when that happened. And it was like, and this was what took me so long pulling it out of him, how he felt about this and why he didn't go on Oprah, why he didn't go on the local news and then the national news. And, they come out and take it away and, start examining it and all that. So he needed time, and he knew that this thing was presumably going to decompose unless it was a robot, unless it was a machine or something. He didn't know. So he bagged it up in heavy duty plastic and put it in a box. And he knew he needed to do something to stop that decomposition. So he took it. He had a cousin or a relative who owned a restaurant with a big walk-in freezer. So he takes this box with an alien body in it. Yeah. And he tells let's say it's his cousin, I shot this pig, because in Texas, we have wild pigs everywhere. And especially if you're in a rural area. And so sometimes people eat them. So he said, I shot this pig. I got to figure out what to do with it, but I need to refrigerate it. Will you keep it? And the cousin says, sure, fine. So he keeps it in his freezer at his restaurant. And so cousin doesn't know what's in there. He thinks it's a pig, wild pig. And so I guess time passed, and his cousin's saying, if you don't know what you want to do with this, I know somebody who can process the meat for you. And so Clay's like, yikes, we can't have that. And he says, no, I know some homeless people or some poor people that I've offered it to. So I'm going to come get it, and, I'll have it processed and I'll take care of it. So he goes back up to, and this is a while past, some time passed before this happened, and he's still trying to figure out what to do with it. And he's really stressing over it. So he finally has to go up and get this body. And he said to me that he got the body, and he had decided at that point that he needed to do the right thing. So he was going to give it a kind of a proper burial. So, but the first thing he did was, when he got it back, was to buy whatever equipment he needed to kind of vacuum pack it. What that would do, I don't know, except maybe preserve it if later on he decided to dig it up or whatever. Okay. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't think he was thinking rationally. He was just kind of following, whatever instincts he had. And so he vacuum packed the thing, and then he buried it near this airport. Now he had some property where he and his wife were going to build a house. That's why he built the apartment on the hangar. And so they had property nearby that they were going to build their house on. So they were just living temporarily in this apartment. So whether the thing was buried there or nearer to the airport remains to be seen. But he buried the alien, and he said a little, he told me that when all this began, he said, I was about as religious as a hog. But throughout all this, partly because he was scared, he started kind of retreating into the religion that he had grown up with. His mom was a Catholic, and so he started reading the Bible. And then at one point he had a priest come out and bless the place, and he put silver crosses over doorways and everything like that. So by the time he gets to this point where he's burying this alien, he's reading the Bible again, and he's kind of revisiting the religion of his childhood, and he tries to give this creature a proper burial and a proper send-off at that point.
Now, after this, was this the final event, or did the experiences continue in any way?
After he buried the alien, the experiences continued. I think at that point, his wife, and this goes back to his wife's craziness, possession, whatever it was, she came out to the hangar, to the shop one day, and unloaded a 38 special at him and his crew.
Whoa.
Yeah. And thankfully nobody was hurt, but she was arrested, and that was the last straw for his marriage. So after that point, he was living there by himself, and he got divorced. Obviously he divorced her at that point. He kept trying to say it's not her fault. She's possessed. This isn't her doing. But when it got to that time, his crew was threatened. His business was threatened. His life was threatened. And, he had to say, that's enough. Even if I still love you, I've got to say, no, we're done.
Now, as I would do, there was attempts made to find and excavate this body, right?
No, there has not.
No.
I have a team now that we're working on finding the location. We're following clues that we've got and information that I got from Clay. And we've got a team now that has, we've got professionals on the team, and we have a lot of technology, ground penetrating radar and metal detector and LiDAR and things like that.
Now, is there a timeline for what you're trying to do here?
We're hoping to get something done before the end of the year. Ideally, that's what we'd like to do. So, and in the meantime, we're also, in addition to scanning the areas that we think where he might have buried, he buried the helmet, this skull cap thing, and he buried the body in the same place, supposedly. Now, all of this is up for grabs. We don't know whether he did or he didn't. But we have a team that's going to be coming out and looking for locations, see if we can find a location that seems promising. And then if we do, we're going to dig. But there's a kicker in here. He said, when he told my husband, he said, I might have booby trapped it. I can't remember.
Huh.
Yeah. I can't remember because I was on a lot of drugs at the time. Now, normally you say I was on a lot of drugs at the time, you would think that means recreational drugs. But for Clay, it was prescription drugs because he had so much damage by the time we got to the killing and burial of an alien that his mind was messed up from all the drugs. And so literally his brain was Swiss cheese. So wherever we dig, we have to be extremely careful. And we have a bomb technician with a lot of expertise from the military on the team. So he's the one who's going to, once we find a location that says, okay, it looks like the ground was disturbed, it looks like we've got one or more boxes or whatever they are underground, that's when we'll start being very, very careful. And then at that point, the bomb technician is the lead guy. He's the one who directs what we do next. So
now, unfortunately, Clay died.
Yes.
But you were speaking with his mother after, and she revealed some information that actually changed a bit of how you looked at everything. Is that right?
Yes. And you have to read the book to find that out. But it was one of the...
Yeah, we won't give that away.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where, I had gone through all of, corresponding with Clay on email and talking to him on the phone and coming out there and interviewing him. And after he died, so let me back up. In the middle of all of this, my brother Jim O'Connell was about to come out to Texas to do a dig, do the scans, and interview Clay for the reality show. And I got a call in the middle of the night, and it was my niece, and she said that my brother had a heart attack and died in his sleep. So that kind of set everything back. And Clay and I both were, everybody was stunned. My sister-in-law, my niece, everybody was stunned. But Clay and my brother had become pretty close. They were kind of like brothers at different points in time. They'd fight and then they'd make up. But Clay felt that Jim understood what he had gone through, and he felt like Jim respected what he had seen, what he experienced, and what he told him. And so, even though Jim was to some extent debunking some of the things too that Clay reported, I think Clay was innocent in all that. There were some times when he just misunderstood what he took pictures or videos and he misunderstood what he was looking at. But so then when my brother died, we were all just kind of stunned. And so my investigation with Clay kind of came to a halt. And we continued to correspond. We continued to talk on the phone. And Clay had, he'd talk about other things. He started, at that point, he started researching things. When it all started, he didn't know anything about UFOs or aliens or the lore at all. And then he started to learn about Skinwalker Ranch and some of the other things. But so we just casually continued talking. And then after about a year, I decided that I needed to do something to remember my brother, to just recognize what he had done and his experiences. So I created a little memorial video, and I sent it out to everybody on email that I knew, including Clay. And I sent it out to all the people that on Facebook that my brother had contacted for their stories. He was interviewing those people with the idea that he was going to tell their stories on his TV show. And so I just put it out on Facebook and I put it out on email, but I didn't hear back from Clay. And I knew Clay and my brother were close enough that he would have commented, at least sent me an email or called me. And I didn't hear back from him after I sent that out. And so I waited and I waited and I still didn't hear from him. And so I emailed his sister and I said, I haven't heard from him. I told her that story. And I said, is he okay? And she said, no, he's in the hospital. He has multiple organ failure and he has flesh eating bacteria. And if he survives, they said they're going to have to remove large patches of his skin. And the next day she told me he died.
Wow.
So
yeah.
the talk with his mom happened months after Clay had died. And I just, paid my respects and just kind of backed off on this story because I know his mom was really uncomfortable, especially in the beginning, that he was even telling anybody the story. Mm-hmm. And yet I talked to her twice, and the first time I talked to her, she freely told me the story about when Clay and his sister were little. They and the mom and dad went on a family trip to Alaska with the travel trailer. And on the way back from Alaska, and I think it was in Idaho, they pulled over for the night just on the side of the road. They were too tired. The dad was too tired to keep on driving. And so they didn't go to a rest stop or anything like that. They just pulled over on a wide spot by the road for the night. And his mom said in the middle of the night, she woke up and she heard this strange noise outside the travel trailer. And she said it sounded like clicking, but it was like clicking in different places. But she was convinced it was communication. It was like this one was clicking over here, and it was talking to this other one in clicking sounds. And she said that she, for whatever reason, knew it was aliens. Now, this is, back in the late 50s or early 60s or something. So the whole alien thing wasn't a big deal. She certainly was not into aliens and UFOs. She absolutely wasn't. But she said for whatever reason, it popped into her head that she knew what that was. And so forever after that, so the dad gets up. She's like, we got to get out of here. So the dad gets up, he gets out, gets in the truck, and they drive away. The dad would never talk about what happened. He, if there are aliens around the travel trailer, he had to get out. Did he see anything? Did he see a ship? Did he see aliens? He refused to talk about it at all. And she said that was actually part of what broke up their marriage, that they wouldn't talk about that. So she told me this. I talked to her before he died. And then after he died, she reminded me of this.
That's incredible. I'd love to get your insights and theories into the possibilities of how the possession and poltergeist connects with some of the other extraterrestrial experiences that Clay was having.
Chris, that is probably the biggest mystery of the whole story. He saw ghosts, he had poltergeists, he had the demonic possession, he had one night what he called a plasma angel in his living room. How do all of these things connect? And being the skeptic part of the team of my brother and I'm looking for conventional explanations. And I'm thinking, so for the longest time, he had talked about seeing the runway lights running around. Mm-hmm. They would get up and they're mounted in 2 feet of concrete. So they clearly aren't getting up and running around the airfield, but he saw them over and over again. His mom thought he was crazy until one night she saw them. And she is so not the kind of person who would lie or exaggerate or make anything up. So in terms of conventional explanations, I'm thinking we know those runway lights did not get up and jump around or twirl around in the air. What else could have caused her, the one witness I've talked to perceive that she saw that? And so what I know is that there was there was an oil rig or an exploratory rig put in at the south end of the runway in 2009, which is the year before all this started. So my first thought goes back to, could they have tapped into a pocket of some kind of gas, toxic fumes, toxic something or other? Or could it have penetrated into the water lines? Because this wasn't happening to just him. It wasn't happening to just Clay. Right. It was happening to everybody at the shop. It would start, like the personality changes would start when they got there, and then they would be fine when they left. There was actually a suicide near the airport. And Clay said this guy would never have done what they said he did. So I'm thinking, what could have caused hallucinations? What could have caused his illnesses throughout the years to where he got sicker and sicker? And he was the only one who was living there full time. So what could be there? What could be in the ground? Could it be some kind of radiation? And we looked for radiation, didn't really find any. But what kind of influence could have been out there that would have affected a lot of people to hallucinate? Or I just don't know.
Well, it makes me think of some of the things that happened at Skinwalker Ranch, where people would get sick and have these effects like they've been poisoned or there's toxins.
Exactly.
And it would coincide with the events and paranormal phenomena.
Exactly. And at Skinwalker Ranch, the radiation effects came and went. Mm-hmm. So you had to be in a certain location, but if you were in that certain location another time, they didn't find the radiation reading. So, the fact that we didn't find anything like that, he said that he had one researcher came out long before we did, who she was, I guess, on her own, and she left in the middle of the night because she said her Geiger counter spiked. So is there something that comes and goes out there? But again, what kind of radiation that comes and goes would cause people to see weird things? So I don't know.
There definitely seems to be this electromagnetic factor that is common amongst all this phenomena. So that's very interesting on how it all comes together. Let's get your thoughts on disclosure right now. There's a lot of interesting things happening in our mainstream media coming from our government. And recently we've had some interesting news, if you want to call it, come out of Mexico, which I'm pretty skeptical about. But I'd love to get your thoughts on all this.
What was the Mexico story? I know about the disclosure.
The alien bodies that were revealed.
Yes, that's right.
The quote-unquote alien bodies.
Jaime Maussan.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I think these are just carvings, and I don't think there's anything to that. But I don't know why they're trying to promote it. They're trying to make it sound like it's credible right now.
Well, all of a sudden, globally, it's okay to discuss aliens, and they're real.
Exactly. Well, and to be honest, that makes me even more skeptical. The fact that the military and the government are saying, "Oh yeah, we're okay with this," I'm thinking, okay, what are you hiding?
What about their track record forever telling the truth?
Right.
Where's that?
So if they're being honest, I think they're manipulating us for some reason, and I'll leave it to you to guess what those reasons are. But I'm intrigued by it all, but being the skeptic, I'm also skeptical about what the government is willing to show us. And there's a thing that your audience is probably familiar with, and it's called a limited hangout, where the government intelligence agencies or whatever will give you a little piece of something that's true in order to maybe distract you from this other thing that they don't want you to think about or don't want you to know about. And so I'm just a skeptic across the board. And I was telling some friends just a couple of days ago that one friend had an experience where there was a ship 70 feet long and about 20 feet wide, oval, cigar shaped, that came over her horse ranch. And It was at night, and she said it was as low as, wasn't any taller than a low telephone pole. So it wasn't even a full telephone pole. It was a lower one that brings power, closer into your house. I said, I want that. I want to see something like that where I can say, I don't care what the government says. I don't care what anybody says. I know what I saw. And so I know it's real. That's what I
Now,
want.
speaking of the military industrial complex, was there any evidence at all that there could have been involvement with this? Because most of the abduction cases that have a malevolent aspect to it, I find there's also some connections somehow with black projects, military industrial complex. The people being abducted will report military personnel there with the aliens.
Right.
And on the other side of it, the more benevolent, what I would call contact experiences, the people actually, the individuals experiencing them have spiritual growth from these experiences, and they're beautiful experiences. So there's a big difference, and there's usually this human element to the negative.
True. Now, my brother was one of those that it was, in a sense, a beautiful experience. And in fact, when I asked Clay in one of the last interviews, I said, was this a positive or negative experience? He said, it's really cool. He starts out saying, well, I think overall it was a negative experience. But, and you could see his demeanor change. He lights up and he says, but, it was fantastic. Every night I could sit out here. It was like being in the Sci-Fi Channel, and you can see his spirit just light up. So, so that's, and I'm sorry, I lost track of your.
I was asking about that's perfect, but the military,
the military connection. Well, there was a point in time where his shop was raided, and he said it was FBI, ATF, and 3 cities worth of SWAT teams. So
really,
but were they connected with this? They didn't seem to be. He said they took his computers, and when he got them all back, they took everything. They took his weapons, they took his ammo, they took his computer.
Was there any allegations or reasons why he
they said that somebody had sent an email from his email address to his client saying, I'm going to shoot you with an AK-47. And it turned out that it was his ex-wife. She had access to his email. Yeah. So, but the fact that they took his computers, and he said when he got them back, some of his best evidence was missing. Some of his best videos and photos were missing. So whether if they knew about what was going on, if they were complicit in it and they were trying to make him look crazy and taking away the good evidence, I don't know. I can't speak to that. A lot of times when I talk to people who've had these experiences, I'll ask them, especially I was talking to somebody just last week, and they said that there was this fog, this black fog that happened when they had their experience. And I said, are you near a military base? And so a lot of these cases happen near military bases. And I've just recently, since last year, been looking into alternative connections through some books that Nick Redfern has written.
Yeah.
And the Rendlesham Forest incident, I believe is the name of the book, that really started me thinking, connecting to military activity. And could it be even, hallucinogenics in this fog and lasers and holograms? And I'm sure your audience is familiar with that again. And why would the military want to manipulate people's perceptions to make them think they saw aliens or UFOs? Right. And that's a whole other question.
Yes. Yeah, that's an entire other rabbit hole. Do you think that there was any type of connections with his ex-wife? This is what I wanted to I find this interesting. If we could possibly look into a little bit more of his ex-wife's history and find out if there's anything interesting in her background. Have you done any of that?
We're actually doing some of that now. His mom had told me that she believed that his ex-wife might have been responsible for the murder of one of her exes. And so my team is trying to find those threads, trying to track her back. Unfortunately, the last I heard from Clay, he tried to get a hold of her because I wanted to interview anybody who was a witness, and he had tried to get a hold of her, and he said that he talked to her sister, and her sister said that she had had a massive stroke, and for all I know, she died. I don't know. But yeah, we're trying to find out if indeed she had other crimes connected to her, or even if she wasn't accused, was she associated with some kind of suspicious cases or anything like that? So
this is definitely a fascinating story.
It is.
Pat, thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely have to do this again. There's so much more we could get into. But before you go, let the audience know if they'd like to get a copy of the book and find out more about you. What's the best way that they can do so?
The book is Bleedthrough, a true story of aliens, demons, and pure evil in Texas. And you can get a hold of me through my brother's. I've resurrected my brother's website, which is experiencers.com with an X, just an X at the beginning, experiencers.com. And you can contact me if you've had any experiences like this. And I've got people, if you need somebody to talk to or to come and investigate, I can get you in touch with people to do that. But it's experiencers.com with an X. And the email is starmanjimmy@gmail.com if you want to contact me directly. And you can find some more information on the website too. And hopefully we're going to have more to post on the website about this project as it unfolds, because the investigation continues.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see how this is all going to turn out. This is so amazing and fascinating. Pat, again, thank you so much. We'll do another one soon.
Awesome, Chris.
And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening, and we will talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.